This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. Hi, this is Julie, and I am here with Susan, and we are continuing with part 4 of Neville Goddard's The Power of Awareness, a Conversation. And this time we're moving into creation. And, you know, we both laughed when we read the first mini sentence, which I think is okay to say here, because Neville Goddard starts with, "Creation is finished."
And so this podcast must be finished, which is actually kind of funny because when you read further on, basically our podcast is finished.
That's right.
It's done and it's gone viral and it's huge. And we're just simply moving with where we are today, but it's already created and everything we're going to say and everything we're going to do is done. So I'm going to go home and take a nap and eat some ice cream.
And all our ebooks are out there and done, and everything's being consumed and loved, and it's abundance, and there you go. And the energy is all happening, and so, creation is finished.
So do you all feel that way? I'm sure you all feel that way. If everything's done, it's perfect, it's all wrapped up in a nice little bow on the top, and we're all done. So,
well, I'll actually say that when I read that, I laughed. And then when I went further down, and I am going to say one other sentence, he says, "In other words, all that you ever have been or ever will be, in fact, all that mankind ever was or ever will be, exists now." And when I heard that and I read that, and, you know, I've read this book a couple of times, but I still sighed. It was like a huge weight is off of your shoulder.
You know, so then a question becomes, is it fate? I mean, is it, you know, this is always the biggest, you know, question that people say. If we're destined, then where is free will? And therefore, if we do something that would be, you know, something we'd be thrown in jail for, well, then by default, I mean, this is what a lot of the argument is, well, if it was fate and it was predestined that I was going to do this, I did not exercise free will. Therefore, I'm not responsible. And I should not be punished. That's what a lot of people, that's the whole idea when they talk about fate and destiny and free will, is that if you subscribe to this, and this isn't exactly what he's saying, so I'm not saying he's saying this. It's just funny. That's the argument that's out there sometimes. And, you know, I've kind of contemplated this sometimes, like, well, if whatever I'm going to do or be is done, then what is it I have to do? To me, the answer to that question is just do what you want to do.
Right.
Do what you want to do, and you're gonna be who you're gonna be.
Right. And in the contemplation of that, it's interesting because as you're throwing out these questions and the contemplation of that, and when I was reading this is the second time, this is from a different podcast, but the second time this popped into my head was Shark Tank. I don't know why. But Shark Tank popped into my head, and sometimes it's fun to watch and see what the determinations are, what the creativity that people have are. Yet, you know, there's always this judgment based in, is it going to make money? Is it this? Is it that? Well, from the situation of looking that whoever comes on and they have a product and they created something, whether it be an app or a physical product, the creativity is already finished, which is funny, and the only thing that has to occur is the manifestation. And so the manifestation most often is they're looking for more to manifest, or they're looking to manifest it, and that's what they're there for. And yet, it seems like oftentimes the conversation turns into, well, that wasn't a product I like, you shouldn't have created it.
I don't think that, I don't see it that way. I think once the product's created, it's manifested. What they're doing is just looking for money. How do I make money off it? Which is what the Shark Tank is. How do I make money off of what I created? So the product's created. It's been manifest.
Well, they're trying to manifest money.
Yes,
so exactly. It's still the manifestation. So the creativity has occurred. Yet my little contentious remark was based in, you know, it's almost turned into the people who are the sharks kind of say, that wasn't a good product. Well, they shouldn't have created. Well, it's already been created. oftentimes you hear that, like, that's not going to do. So the creativity part is never the issue on the show. It's the manifestation of money.
Right.
And that's why I brought it up, because it makes the greatest point here to the fact that the creativity has occurred. It's just a manifestation of money. They're just looking for bankers. They're just looking for people with money. Not that bankers all have money, but they're just looking for money as the manifestation. Yet, what else could be the manifestation?
Well, we talk a little bit about this too, is money versus abundance.
Right.
So, I mean, you can look at it from that standpoint. And the thing that I'm wondering as I read this, and if I'm understanding it, and I started off by saying I ask a lot of questions, because I think this stuff is very deep and it's very thought-provoking, and I often hear things and I can't quite determine what it is that I'm hearing. And so I ask a lot of questions. And I say that, the reason I say that is not the weasel clause, it's just that I think there's a lot more in depth that we can go, and I'm trying to just kind of pull it out and say it briefly instead of going for the nosedive. Like, just do the shallow dive and come up and get the answer, as opposed to going boom. Because when I read this, the question then becomes, what is there to do? If creation is finished, right? And I mean, and I think the answer is that there's the to do is in manifesting the creation the way that you choose to. I don't want to get into my beliefs, because they're my beliefs and they don't belong in this podcast. But it's almost like, certain goals, I think, are going to come across your experience of life, and how well you work with them is what you have say in. Is the to do.
That's interesting, because he goes on further and says, that all of creation exists in you, and it's up to you to become aware of infinite wonders that you can experience as, you kind of dabble in more aspects of it. And I think when he asks, okay, so if creation is finished, then what occurs for the when? And I thought that was a really cool question, because when you take the do I think also blends into the when. And that's notoriously what comes up. I mean, even with us, oftentimes we're like, when? Right. And the when comes up. And he beautifully says that, it's not the when that determines, but the answer to any of that question at all about the time factor, because of course, I always say time is man-made. And so what are we asking really? And the issue of the time factor, the only answer to it is who you're being and the concept of yourself. And so the time factor is irrelevant, because if you're being yourself and you're expressing yourself, and I think that's why I kind of went into Shark Tank, because these people come on with these products that they really believe in. Whether it be, like I said, electronic app or whatever it is, or concepts they really believe in because they're part of themselves. And most often, either they include this footage or whatever, but they include the footage where somebody starts to cry and say, this is why I came up with this, and I really believe in this. And it's really an aspect of a concept of themselves that they're expressing. And so in that manifestation, kind of searching out for a manifestation of money and a when, it doesn't satisfy, something existing, because it already exists. I think that portion of him saying that creation is finished really gives you something to settle back in. It's like you're in a big, easy, comfortable chair, and you can say, oh, great. Like, what am I killing myself for? And I think how I want to explain that is that, because when he says creation is finished, and he goes into, it's actually, stuff you've thought about, stuff you've heard, stuff it's all almost like, it made me think of deja vu. Like, it's familiar to you, and it's all in the now. And that's where the experience is. And so what you encounter and what occurs is never based in the time factor. When we put the when in there, And the true answer is just to really just envelop and go into who we are and the concept of ourselves. That's what moves us forward.
And so if I'm understanding and moving with what you said, is that what's going to be created is already created. Everything that's going to be created is created. It's going to be how you're going to almost like reach into the closet and pull it out and what you're going to experience with it. It's almost like if I understand, it's like a child opening a closet and reaching in and taking out a toy. Oh, I can play with this, and has fun with it, gets tired with it, reaches in, grabs another toy, pulls it out, and maybe says, oh, I don't want to play with this one, and puts it back. The toy represents anything that's going to be created, an event, a thing. You know, it's just like really a person, place, or thing, right? But it's also an event, a conversation, a podcast. Everything that's going to be created is created. And the playing piece of when I talk about the child playing, is how you're going to experience it and when you're going to pull out that event.
Right. So
when you're going to pull the toy out.
Awareness. So it's not really a when, because then it goes into the concept of yourself again. So it's the awareness, I think, because then that brings in the time factor. So
I think time is something, is part of the play. I mean, because if you look at this, and I can see it as like playing with something. Why am I going to put one toy out and then I'm going to pull another toy out? The time piece, I agree with you that it exists. It already exists. It's all there. If I have a closet, all the toys are there. Every single one's there. Which one am I going to take out first to play with? And which one am I going to take out second to play with? And, you know, if there's a child that loves one and doesn't, you know, you give them one, they want the other. We all know you give them a teddy bear. If it's the wrong, no, they scream and yell. Then you give them the other one, then they're fine. That's an extreme example, but it's your experience with it. And so, of course, you would bring whatever has already been created into your experience at a certain time for you to have the experience that you're creating through your concept of yourself.
Right.
So the timing is then it would support what you're saying about it's man-made. Time is it's everything that's going to happen is right there. It's just when you proverbially reach into the closet to pull it out, to work with it.
Right. So I'm just going a little step further to say that the awareness of the irrelevancy of time, it's not the thing to focus on, because really that's kind of usually the stop point that you focus on. Well, when? It hasn't happened. When? You know, so the time part. So if you kind of, what I'm saying is the irrelevancy of the awareness takes you into the real awareness importance is that you're exploring the concept of yourself.
And what I'm saying is that time is supporting your concept of yourself. The timing is not a grand scheme. Oh, this is going to happen in 6 months because, the Almighty has decided that. It's you decided how your concept works. And if you believe, I got to work so hard to achieve this, well, of course, you're going to push the time off. So whatever the event is occurs later.
Exactly. We're both saying the same thing. The only slight little difference is that, and I don't want to put these words into your mouth, but the way I hear the inflection, okay, is that time is, supporting our experience. Our experience of ourselves.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And I'm saying time is supporting our experience of ourselves. So our inflection is just a little bit different. So that's why I said the relevancy of time, because I'm saying the stress, if you're focusing on the time, understanding the time part is great. Right. But if you're focusing on the time, that doesn't do anything for you.
But if you have in your mind a concept of, what do I want to throw out there? That, well, I'm going to start this business and I know it's going to take me at least 5 years because everyone's told me it's going to take me 5 years to get such and such going. And it takes 5 years to experience the ups and downs. Well, by default, you're using time to create the concept that you are going to experience.
Right. And so
but you can't get out of it.
But what I just mentioned was not to focus on the time, but to focus on your experiencing the concept of yourself
right.
more.
So you're talking about your focus, and I hear
Yes.
you. I'm saying that your time is going to work in terms of your concept of yourself.
Right.
So you're right. Your
So
focus
if you go-
should not be on time. Your focus
Right,
should be on
because
what
if-
you want and that.
Right, because when he goes further on, even in that paragraph, he says, if you assume that you have a wonderful business and you put it in your imagination and that's your focus, and then people start talking to you about the wonderful business you have, and they start telling you, and then you even expand it further. So he's not saying this happens in the course of a year and that's what you focus on. No, he's saying you focus on that concept. And so I'm just stressing the concept more than the time. And I think that's my own feeling, that it's much richer.
No, I agree
when you stress
with you.
the concept of yourself, because
I
time
agree with
always
you.
comes in. We've always been there, frustrated by it.
But I agree with you. All I'm saying is that time supports your concept of yourself. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying time's the focus. I agree with you.
Right.
The focus is the concept of yourself. But time is going to have the events occur in a way that supports your concept of yourself.
But see, I just want to highly emphasize your concept of yourself. Okay, moving into interference, which is next. I have all I can do not to yell out, penalty on the call! Interference!
I was going to ask you, I wonder why he called it interference. It's an interesting name to this chapter.
It's a great name for distraction.
Exactly.
It's also, and I think also, distraction is something that could be going on out there, and then you choose to be a part of that, so you don't have to. But I think interference, maybe, I would say, is, all the stuff that comes at you. And if you just kind of go out there, a lot of stuff comes at you. And the premise of this is, what I get is that you make yourself feel, you make yourself do all of that. You make yourself, have that experience.
You possess the power of intervention, the power which enables you to alter the course of your future. So interference, which is exactly what you started to say, interference, it's when something comes in and it's an intervention and it changes. And so this is interesting because I get that it's really about you can change the course of your life at any given point in time.
Right. And it's funny about the interference part too, because you made me think in different sports. If you're playing basketball, that was interference, and when you call out something like that, or if that occurs, the person is kind of expressing, or you're expressing that you were in the process of doing something, and then something came at you and kind of stopped you or distracted you from doing it, but in a big way, where you were like, boom, stopped. And in that sense, it's interesting, because the biggest part on this chapter that really affected me was the process of rising from your present concept to a higher concept of yourself is the means of all true progress. And that using your imagination and your intention, remembering that we're all consciousness, is what gets us there, and to really stay in that awareness of it.
Well, I always go to the core of it. And he talks about imagining yourself to be the ideal you dream of and desire. And then you remain attentive to this imagined state. And as fast as you completely feel that you are already this ideal, it will manifest itself as reality in your world. And then further down, thus imagination made your world. And it's funny because if you're in a situation that you don't choose to be in, it's your imagination that gets you out of it. And it's not you imagine how you're going to get out of it. You just imagine yourself. And again, this goes back to one of the earlier chapters with the importance of your imagination. How else can you imagine being rich if you're poor? And I use the word imagine, but how can you see yourself rich if you are poor, if it physically looks like you're poor? In your imagination, you can feel it and you can experience it. And if you stay clear to that, things change. Money starts finding its way to you. And I think the interference, which he says the power of intervention, occurs all the time, which was funny because, people go to a a psychic to get a reading. What's my future holds? It's like, well, you can go into the space of where someone is. You don't have to even be psychic. You can see them. If you talk to someone for 2 minutes, you know what their mindset is to a degree. And then it doesn't take much to say, well, I see that, you're going to be struggling for a long time, or you're going to be good.
Yeah, right. Because also you're in that awareness and you're in that space of consciousness. And when he says, there's only one substance, I mean, that's really beautiful. He says there's only one substance, and it's consciousness. And to move from that, I mean, granted, you can't hold on to it. It's not tangible, and you just have to work with your imagination in it. And your imagination is what forms it into concepts. And then they get manifested into conditions, circumstances, physical objects. And again, that's imagining your world around you. I mean, again, imagine that, because it puts the responsibility upon yourself. I mean, nobody's doing anything to you.
Right.
You got to work with your attention and your imagination, and you're making yourself feel the way you are or be the way you are.
So this chapter, because what we're saying, we've been saying all along, because he's not going to change, obviously, but it's the intervention that if you're in a situation that you like, you can get more of it. If you're in a situation that you don't like, you have the power to change it always.
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.